It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into an episode of Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, I hope that this is a much more smooth ride than yesterday's afternoon drive was, for me at least.
We had a rocky drive yesterday from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
So let's
Where would you say that we were taking the afternoon drive on yesterday geographically?
Like we were down in the hills of West Virginia somewhere. We were on a bumpy dirt road, and at times it was not clear that we were going to make it to our destination.
No, absolutely not. It was scuffed from the jump. I mean, we were supposed to have a guest on yesterday. That didn't end up working out. And then the internet connection issues that I was having a couple times. My laptop then crashed when I was trying to edit the episode. There was just yesterday's episode. It's a miracle that we got it out. So anybody that watched it,
you know what? I think that was the universe telling us that we should take off-season holidays off, right? That we should just
that's
celebrate the beauty of Abe Lincoln and take President's Day off. Maybe, I don't know. I called an agent yesterday, and they were like, "Oh, no, he's not in the office today." I'm like, why? And they're like, it's President's Day. And I was like,
why?
You didn't answer the question. I mean, you kind of did answer the question, but you did not really answer the why. Still is well, whatever. We got through it.
Yeah.
Let's have a better one today.
I'm anticipating that and very hopeful of that happening. Alan, I think this is going to be interesting. Thank you to somebody that presented this to us on YouTube. Matt Nerdy commented to us and basically said, they were divvying up the positions of need that they felt the Steelers had. You look at it very clearly: center, corner, offensive tackle, linebacker, safety. I mean, plethora of needs, obviously. But how do you attack those via draft and via free agency? Like, how do you divvy up the way that you want to attack those, given obviously the limited draft capital and also the limited resources that they're going to have in free agency as well? And I think that's a really interesting topic. I thought it was a great question, and that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah, so it sort of spins off the conversation we had yesterday where I kind of said, look, this team doesn't have that much cap space. They still have a bunch of big needs. Trading for Justin Fields or a big swing in free agency on Kirk Cousins doesn't feel realistic. So what is realistic, I think, is a really good it's a good follow-up question, right? And so I think that's a good place to start the conversation with here. I guess we should start out, I don't know, where do you want to start this? Like what I guess, do you want to rank them? Do you want to rank the needs?
Sure, because I'm curious to see where the two of us even maybe differ here. Now, obviously, let's just do that, and then we'll maybe justify if there are some differences. Because for me, while there might be some discourse about the positional value, center's number one for me. Like, I think especially because of the athleticism that is required of the position, at least to be like a baseline level athlete in Arthur Smith's offense. There's just no way that they could go into next season, in my opinion, with Mason Cole as the starting center. So that is why I would have that as number one. 2 and 3 are a tie for me between cornerback and tackle. I think they could probably go either way. And I think that it's a prerequisite for whoever is brought in at corner to be saying the word athlete just gets kind of thrown around a lot, but clearly there were not enough athletes in the secondary last year for the Steelers. You look at the explosive plays that they gave up, but they weren't even a matter of getting the top taken off of them. They were just getting stretched so far from sideline to sideline, and they didn't have the players on the back end to be able to keep up with those guys. So then, they weren't able to cut the corner and they would lose track there. I mean, watching Patrick Peterson try to cover drag routes across the field and stuff like that, especially in Houston, was getting exposed. And then I think tackle too. I think that they need obviously an upgrade there on Dan Moore. That's the one that maybe I don't know. I'm curious to see if you think they could get away with one more season of Dan Moore if they really had to. But those would be 1, 2, and 3 for me.
Interesting. My number one answer is not any of those. Their biggest need is quarterback. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to be able to address that need with what they have to work with this offseason, right? I just discussed they don't have the money. They are not going to let me just say, if Jaden Daniels falls to 15, the Steelers should trade up 5 spots and go get him. That's That's how quarterback is too important for it not to be a need for teams that don't have success. The Steelers also just don't have any depth. They literally have one guy. So, I mean, I think quarterback for me is the number one need. I will say, however, it is not a need that I expect to be addressed in the form of like getting someone that I expect to replace Kenny Pickett in 2024, but it is and will continue to be the top need until it is addressed.
That is why I did not have it on my exactly what you just said. I should have thought about it, but absolutely what you just said there in terms of addressing it in 2024 in the form of it not being Kenny Pickett as the starter is why I didn't put it on there. But it should have been. It should be.
My number two need, and I'll break the tie between tackle and cornerback, right? I agree that both of these places are spots where they have guys that have played and could play, but you would probably not want to play, right? In Patrick Peterson and Dan Moore. And also in Patrick Peterson's case is also expensive. In addition to you don't really necessarily want to tie yourself to him as your future starter. For me, I'll break the tie with tackle ahead of corner. I think that the Steelers have shown that their idea and of their identity is to be from the trenches out. And so that makes tackle more of a priority for this team. I also think, given what Arthur Smith wants to do on the offense, that tackle will be just the offensive line in general will become more important than, say, wide receiver, would be for another team. I think the Steelers are going to want to have a dominant offensive line to go with this offensive scheme that they're installing. They don't currently have that. And I just think tackle compared to center is a position where it's relatively hard to find good play. They're hard to get. You can find some centers around. They are less scarce. And so that's why I think tackle is my number one need, or my number two need. Number three, I will say cornerback. They need help both inside and outside. I do expect that they'll find a way to bring Patrick Peterson back, but either way, I'm not thrilled about him being a starting outside corner. And I'm only okay with the idea of him being like one of their top slot options. They probably need somebody else there. I agree that just overall the secondary was too slow in 2023, something that Nick Farabaugh has been harping on for close to a year now. And I agree. And then I think I have center 4. The positional value of center is not strong, but I do think like you said, the demands of this offense will be high on that position. I don't think that Mason Cole is like a guy that they just can't play in 2024. I think he had a bad year. I think he was much better in 2022 than he was in 2023. I think most of the issues with Mason Cole were shotgun snaps and pass protection, and I think the new scheme will minimize those to some extent. They'll probably play more under center than they did. They will probably run the ball more than they did. I think they can get through another year with Mason Cole if they have to. But I really like the center class, and I think that's my fourth need. There are lots more. You want me to keep going? I think
absolutely. So what I do want to say though, to add to the Mason Cole thing and why I had it as number one wasn't because I agree and with a lot of what you just said there. Like if they were going to be running it back with a similar offense in 2024, I think it's fair to say that he would improve and look like the 2022 as opposed to 2023. My question is about the switch in the scheme and going to more of like a zone run concept, if that's what they're going to do, in the athleticism that is required at the position from Arthur Smith's offense, as opposed to what that offense has looked like with Mason Cole at center.
I think the scheme actually will benefit Mason. I think he'll be better with Arthur Smith's offense than he was the way the Steelers were running last year. He's not a great athlete, but I think his biggest problems were all the shotgun pass pro. Like his run blocking was fine. It wasn't great, but it was fine. If we were just taking the run blocking version of Mason Cole, no one would be talking about him needing replaced this offseason. It was all about the pass pro.
If we could get to have
the shotgun pass pro.
If every game for him looked like the game that he had, or not the game that he had, that one rep on the long Jaylen Warren touchdown run in Cleveland. If every rep looked like that.
He had a great rep on that long Jaylen Warren run against Baltimore at home. Also, the one where
I actually know exactly what you're talking about. Yep.
he kind of like hurdled a guy, right? And then there was like that. There was like 3 plays in a row. There was a pass to Warren, then he hurdled a guy. Then there was another one. It was like an 18-yard inside run. He had a great seal block on that one. He had some good moments. I expect Mason Cole, that if Mason Cole is the starting center for the Steelers in 2024, he'll be better than he was last year. And I think that's a reasonable expectation. I do think they will try to find a long-term replacement for him, and that's why I'm a little, maybe a little hesitant there in terms of free agency. Aaron Brewer's a good fit and a young guy as a free agent. I think that's important. Like, I don't want a 31-year-old free agent center, right? If you're going to sign somebody that you think is going to be your answer for 5 years and just lock the position down. But I'll keep going after center, defensive tackle. And I actually have these two very close together because of the uncertainty of the contract situations with both Larry Ogunjobi and Cam Hayward. Kind of, not really performing up to their cap hits. I expect that they're going to do something with Cam and probably just bite the bullet with Larry, because I don't really see a better way for them to get a better defensive lineman into the team this year. But it's not a very good situation, right? I mean, Cam's getting older, play is declining a little bit, at least, and certainly dealt with the injury bug. It's a place they should be looking for long-term answers to go alongside Keanu Benton and that kind of new generation of defensive line. Larry Ogunjobi, I think they would love to cut if they felt like they had a viable replacement. So go find one. Inside linebacker, it's a very scary situation here that really, a whole lot is counting on Cole Holcomb recovering from a pretty gnarly knee injury. Landon Roberts, another year older, also coming off an injury. I thought he played really well, probably the best football of his career in 2023, but can that continue? And there's really nobody behind them, right? Quan Alexander, another Achilles. Have to think that that's a scary person to rely on at this point, given his injury. Mark Robinson coming along very slowly. Don't really think that he's an answer. Strong safety is the other place. They need Terrell Edmonds back, or to find another Terrell Edmonds. They need an in-the-box, tight end eraser, traditional strong safety that's a good athlete. Keanu Neal just did not work in that role even before he got hurt. They need to find a way to improve there. So those are my sort of 7 big needs. There are some smaller needs, right? Like they need a number 3 quarterback. They need a 3rd running back. They need a 4th edge rusher. These are things that you can find laying around on the scrap heap on July 1st. But in terms of like places that I'm looking at for major acquisitions this offseason, those are the 7 for me.
Yeah, so then I guess the question becomes, the other part of this was divvying them up. So you got to take a look at what there is in free agency and what there is in the draft, and also, even how much money they're going to have in free agency as opposed to the number of draft picks they have. So there's a lot of layers to this conversation, and it's why I said you probably have to circle 1 or 2 positions that you would really like to target in free agency. Obviously, you got to have that space to do so. And then it's going to come to the draft and their ability to draft and kind of run it back with what they were able to do in the draft in 2023 and hit another home run there. So that's why I've talked so much about addressing safety in free agency, because I like it much more than addressing it in the draft. But Alan, in your opinion, is there a couple positions there that you talked about that you would say, this has to be free agency or this has to be the draft?
Well, I think this is why you start to cross quarterback off the list, right? Because there's just no way to make it happen. If you're talking about wanting, 4 or 5 immediate type starters, at least down to defensive tackle on that list, there's just no way to make that happen, right? You don't have enough money in free agency. Maybe they could get 2 starters in free agency. That's kind of the very most. Great draft gets you 3 starters. And I mean, a great draft, like an all-time draft gets you 3 starters, given where the Steelers are drafting. There's just not enough, right? And so I think quarterback to me is spend a little bit of money, not a lot, and use a day 3 draft pick on taking a swing at a guy. And that's about all they can do at that position. I'm expecting someone like Ryan Tannehill, maybe Russell Wilson, but I'm just personally not a big fan. But he's certainly in the conversation there. Guys like Sam Darnold, Jacoby Brissett, Marcus Mariota, Tyrod Taylor, that ilk of quarterback. Tackle and corner to me feel like the 2, really tackle, corner, and center. Between those 3 spots, I think they should feel good about getting not maybe day 1, but year 1 starters in rounds 1 and 2. I think between rounds 1 and 2, you can get 2 of those 3 filled very easily. You could also sub in D tackle there. There are just so many fewer options at that position that fit the Steelers. You know, like there's 4 centers that I think I would consider like a top 3 round grade. And they like the Steelers can work with them all. There's maybe 6 or 7 defensive tackles, but you know, not all of them are exactly what the Steelers are going to be looking for. With them playing an odd front, they do have different demands than other teams. Not everybody is just plug and play on a Pittsburgh defense. And so I think D tackle seems like it's possible, but maybe a little bit less likely than those other 3. And also, you know, when we start to look at free agency, and maybe this is the next place, like we talked about the tackles and the corners yesterday, right? And then we talked about Aaron Brewer. You know, there aren't a lot of center free agents out there. You know, but it is the one position where maybe you could get by a little cheaply because it's not a position to high in demand. Lloyd Cushenberry's out there. Tyler Biadasz is out there, and Evan Brown. And so like there's some starters, like those are okay guys, whatever. D tackle, you're not going to get if you don't draft a D tackle, you're not getting one because they're extremely expensive, and you know they're not going to throw the Brinks truck at Justin Madubuike, right? Like they're not going to be the one to do that. I mean, maybe you can get someone somewhere, but it's going to be difficult.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, you mentioned 4 centers in the first 3 rounds. Who's the 4th one? Because obviously everybody talks about the top 3. Is Bo Limmer out of Arkansas the 4th one that you're considering?
No, I actually wasn't that impressed by Limmer. Graham Barton, who played tackle at Duke.
Oh, yeah.
Some places have him listed as a tackle still. He's not a tackle. He's a center or a guard. Obviously, the Steelers would play him at center, right? Or at least would try to play him at center.
Sure.
Other teams are looking at him as a guard, but he would be a center option for the Steelers.
Yeah, he's even getting some first round buzz. I've seen back end of the first round buzz as of late. So
yeah, Zach Frazier was mocked in the first round by Daniel Jeremiah. I think he had all 3 of them: Powers, Johnson, Barton, and Frazier in his first round. So it's going to be difficult, I think, to have a 2023 draft again, right? Where you just nail 3 straight starters. Like it, you know, remember they had that extra pick last year in the Claypool trade. It's going to be pretty difficult to pull that off again. I really think you're looking at probably 2 starters from the draft class in terms of guys that are going to start games in 2024 as all that's really realistic.
Yeah. So for me, it's tough because like if you were, and I don't even know if this is the right way to word this, but like if you're talking about the first 3 rounds, hoping to get starters within those first 3, and that's obviously, like you said, kind of like a best case scenario, and you go tackle, center, to me, corner, like, because in the 3rd round, especially in this draft class that I'm looking at now, like a Chris Abrams, Drain, Kyrie Jackson, like those types of guys, if they're available in round 3, I think those are guys that can start on the outside in year 1. Now, game 1, I don't know, but I think at some point in year 1 they could. So, like, to me, that would be their best path. Now, I'm not saying, hey, the Steelers have to be dead set on taking this position here, this position here, and this position here, because, you know, you never want to get locked into that. You want to take the best available player. But I think that that's probably the best path for them getting 3 starters out of this draft class is tackle, center, then corner.
Yeah, 3rd round guys that I think make really good, a lot of sense for them. A corner would be guys like Mike Sanderstill from Michigan, Kyrie Jackson from Oregon, Cam Hart from Notre Dame, Chris Abrams-Drain from Missouri. Maybe like down to like a guy like Kalen King from Penn State.
If Kalen King,
Jarvis Brownlee from Louisville had a very nice Senior Bowl. Cam Hart from Notre Dame also was flashing at the Senior Bowl. So I think those guys are a lot of potential. You know, the other thing about corner is, you know, that they do have Patrick Peterson, and they do have Corey Trice and Darius Rush, who they like, who are like promising options. And so if they could shore the slot up, it would not be insane to go into a season with Pat Pete and those 2 guys and say, okay, let's see what we have in these guys. Let's give it 1 more year on corner and move along. If they could get the slot taken care of. And the slot guys go way later in the draft process. Like you can get a starting slot guy in like the 5th round.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying that this is a similar approach because I'm trying to think back as to how that offseason even went, but like they went into 2021 with James Pierre expected to be starting on the outside, like after playing 38 snaps in
Yeah.
2020. And obviously, like there was like the COVID ramifications on the salary cap had to play into that and everything. Obviously, they didn't resign Mike Hilton, some other Steven Nelson. Obviously, they let go, and he ended up going on. But so I do wonder if that maybe is the approach to take. Shore up the slot with like a Mike Sainristil out of Michigan, and then let those guys battle. Because like Corey Trice is basically going to be part of this upcoming draft class. Like he's going in this year as a rookie. So
yeah,
I
and
don't know.
Rush too. I mean, he played a little bit, but very
Yeah.
little. I mean,
Mhm.
it's
Oh yeah, he got hurt and with the Colts too. So like that's why
yeah,
he was waived, I
yeah, yeah,
guess.
yeah. So I mean, I think it's reasonable to pass on corner. I think it's reasonable to pass on center too. Like I think that Cole can get by. I do love the idea of taking a center in this draft, though. For
Yeah.
me, really, tackle is the spot where it's like this is a very deep tackle class. You're not likely to drafting where the Steelers normally draft, get a tackle as good as they could get this year. Most years, if you're drafting at 20, you are not going to get a player that is going to start right away at tackle. And I really think they could this year. And even if they don't get a player that's going to start right away, they can get a really, really high upside guy then, who could profile as one of the best in the league. And so I think tackle to me feels really good. Corners there if they want it, especially in the first round.
Mhm.
In the second round, it's a little bit dicier. There aren't like a ton of obvious fits for their second round pick. Maybe Kamari Lassiter out of Georgia, if he makes it to them, is maybe the one
Yeah.
guy that I would say feels like a Steelers pick there. But there aren't as many obvious options. But that's starting in the third round and moving forward. There are a lot of good choices there
Yeah.
for them at corner, and especially at slot corner. Guys that are a lot of these places will list him as safety, like Tyke Smith out of Georgia. Like for me, he's a slot corner. He's a Mike Hilton clone. Like I think that's his role,
Mhm.
and I think that's how the Steelers would use him if they drafted him. And so I think there's a lot of ways that they can fix corner besides drafting another Joey Porter Jr. Which I mean, like, hey, if they get their hands on Ennis Rakestraw, that's pretty much what he is. But like there's options there, right? And so I'm interested to see which they'll prefer if they get a board where, let's say, a like a JC Latham and a Terrion Arnold are both still on the board, right? Like which way would they go
Well, I know
if
which
they
way
get that kind of look? I don't know. I think it can be tempting either way. But for me, I think tackle and corner are overwhelmingly the most likely options for the first round pick. And now free agency, it's interesting. Like I agree with you. I think in free agency, I'm looking at these positions. I think quarterback, right? They're going to sign a quarterback, but I think
Mhm.
down the list, places like safety and linebacker to me feel like spots that they're just not going to get the right kind of upgrade in this draft class, at least not until late on day 3. Box safety feels like, and especially like the amount of strong safety that is played around the NFL right now is at an all-time low. The Steelers have DeMonte KZ, so if they want to play 2 high safeties, they can just play KZ. They literally just need like a part-time box safety. It should not cost that much money. They should be able to find one. Linebacker, I think they've got to find some kind of coverage specialist linebacker. It's very clear that whatever Mark Robinson becomes, it's not going to be that. And so you're not really hindering his development anyway in any way if you
Mhm.
go out and sign someone that can be that for them. They really need someone that, if Cole Holcomb doesn't work out, can be that dime and nickel linebacker. With Holcomb coming off an injury at his age, I think it's 2 straight injuries. I think it's
Mhm.
really important. So if I'm looking for free agents, I think quarterback is an obvious one, and I think I'm looking really hard at corner just to see if there's a big upgrade, a big swing that can be made. That's probably the place where I'd be trying to make it. But I think linebacker and safety are probably, in center, are probably the positions that I see most likely to be addressed in free agency.
I don't want to move away from this. I do want to come back to this, but as you were talking about the tackle, it made something pop in my mind. So, like, I have to bring free agency and the draft, kind of marry them together here. Like, with looking at, and we talked about the the tackle free agent class yesterday and how there's just not many options out there for the Steelers. Does that kind of, in your mind, pigeonhole them into having to take a tackle? And is that a problem if that's the case?
I don't think they're pigeonholed because I think they're probably excited about taking one of these tackles. Like I'd be excited. I'd be excited about having, like, if you hand me this draft board, you say, what do you want to draft? I'm going to say tackle, regardless of what my team's needs are. Like this is the year to want a tackle. And so I don't think it bothers them that it's about, like, I don't think they're even going to look at free agent tackles. Dan Moore has not been so bad that it's like, we can't let the draft go by and not get one. You know, I think the Steelers have been very intentional about that over the years, where they will sign a guy and then draft a guy at the same position if they just have a gaping hole, right? Because they don't want to go into the draft having to draft a position. And I think Dan Moore, while not good, certainly is good enough that the Steelers would not feel like they have to draft a tackle if the draft just doesn't fall that way. If Terry and Arnold is there, but none of the top corners or none of the top tackles, then they can just take Terry and Arnold and say, okay, great. We got a great corner. And then the second round comes around and Zach Frazier's there, but Patrick Paul and the other second round tackles are not. Great. We've upgraded corner and center in big ways. And we got another year of Dan Moore we're going to have to find a way to deal with. Like, they're not going to fix all of their problems this offseason. I don't feel like they're pigeonholed in any way at any position. But if there's a place to pigeonhole yourself in at this draft class, it is tackle.
Yeah, that's fair. And the other thing I wanted to mention, we talked about yesterday, like, very unrealistic for the Steelers to make like a huge splash in free agency. If they felt that strongly about a player, though, like, could they create the space to go out and do it? Sure. But in your mind, if there was that position, is that corner, like, if there was a group that they were like, okay, no, we are going to make this move, we're going to create the cap space to do so, we feel this strongly about this player, is that a corner, or where do you think that would be if they were going to make that big splash?
Corner for sure. And again, it's because, like, oh, you could just say, okay, we cut Pat Peterson, we save, X $1 million, we can add it to the pool, and let's go sign Jaylon Johnson. By the way, they were reported to be interested in Jaylon Johnson at the trade deadline. I doubt they were interested in him as a pure rental. They were interested in Jaylon Johnson because they want to re-sign him. He's only 24 years old, so very, very young free agent. So this is a guy that you could easily give a 5 or 6 year contract to and feel pretty good about it. I think Jaylon Johnson is a player that would be very interested in making a big swing at. Defensive tackle would be the other one. The problem becomes, you have to make a deal with Cam Hayward, and then you got to figure you're going to have to cut Larry Ogunjobi if you're going to make a big signing of that position. If you take on the dead money from cutting Larry Ogunjobi, can you spend? How much do you have to spend to make it an upgrade, right? Because with Larry's contract, they don't save a lot of money, even though Larry is not really performing up to his cap hit. They don't save a lot of money by releasing him, right? They mostly just absorb dead cap hit. So if they cut Larry Ogunjobi, they save $6 million, but they take $7 million dead cap hit. And so, are you gonna get a player better than Larry Ogunjobi for $6 million? Well, no. Right, you're not. And so if you spend $15 million or $20 million, let's say you get Javon Hargrave, right, back on the free. Let's say you spend $20 million a year to get Javon Hargrave back. Now you're talking about adding $27 million to the rolls to save 6 and cutting Larry. You better save 10 or 15 somehow in Cam's, because otherwise you're not going to make that work, right? And so I just think the salaries at defensive tackle compared to what the Steelers are already paying and are already stuck paying make it a little harder for me to see it working. With Patrick Peterson, the Steelers only have a $2.9 million dead cap hit if they cut him, and that's all they're on the hook for. And in fact, they can post June 1st him, and they can make that even less, right? And so, no, actually they can't, because it's last year's deal. But still, they can get away from Patrick Peterson for a relatively small amount of money. And so that makes it, I think, a little bit more reasonable to take a big swing at corner, go sign someone like Jaylon Johnson, L'Jarius Sneed. I also think there's, a couple guys out there that make sense for the Steelers, maybe more so than defensive tackle, where there's only 1 or 2 big options. I think the corner free agent class is a little bit easier to envision multiple guys coming to the Steelers and having success. Kendall Fuller, someone we mentioned yesterday. the slot guys, Keyshawn Nixon, Sean Murphy Bunting. I mean, I think there's several players that I think they could make that kind of upside. Now, not all those guys are big swings, but I think there's a lot of good fits. I suppose defensive tackle, where it's really only one or two guys that I think the Steelers would even be that interested in.
Yeah. The Jaylon Johnson stuff at the deadline feels so long. I have somebody that a friend that covers the Bears, and they were texting me that day, and they were like, I legitimately think that you guys are going to end up landing him. Like, they felt like it was going to happen.
The idea was they were going to trade for Jaylon Johnson and then trade Levi Wallace to the Bills, and the trade fell apart. The Steelers were balking at the asking price, and then the Bills went and got
Rasul Douglas
from the Packers, and then the whole deal fell apart, right? But yeah, the Steelers had a deal with the Bills to send Levi Wallace back to Buffalo, and they didn't end up happening.
Yeah. Just interesting to see how things would have played out, obviously, with Jaylon Johnson here, and how differently we would be looking at the Steelers' needs if that were the case. But we'll continue to talk about this. We got some good feedback in the comments yesterday about our ideas of doing the mock stuff. So people were actually saying to do full mock offseason, which I think is going to be interesting, and we can do down the line, including draft and free agency together. So like a discussion we just had on here, basically turning it into our own separate things and putting together our own off seasons and then discussing the similarities and differences in them. So we will do that down the line. But Alan, for now, tell the people they can find you.
Find me at @Saunders_PGH on social media, PGH Steelers Now, sites account, SteelersNow.com. Read all my words. Daniel Jeremiah mocked a guard to the Steelers in the first round. I think he's wrong. That's pretty much it. Talked to Matt Miller from ESPN today. That should be coming up on the next day or so. Tease, tomorrow we have a guest again, and tomorrow's guest shares a first name, with a Steelers Now staff member, but spells it differently.
Okay, there it is. I'm Zachary Smith, PGH. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell here. If you are listening somewhere else, whether that's Apple, Spotify, wherever that might be, wherever your podcast from, leave us a 5-star review over there. Hit us in the comments with any questions, comments, concerns, thoughts about what we talked about, all that good stuff and more. Until next time, Alan Saunders for Zachary Smith. Thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.